In 1962, nearly 40 million Americans passed through a county fairground gate. They paid a quarter to get in and stepped into a world that no longer exists. Number 14 on this list was so common that every single fairground in the Midwest had one, but today it would be shut down before noon. Number 3 involved a tradition so beloved that grown men wept when it finally disappeared in the 1980s. These were not sideshows. These were the main events that families saved up all year to experience. But insurance companies, corporate sponsors, and changing tastes wiped them out one by one. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because what you are about to hear might bring back memories you forgot you had. Let us count down the 25 county fair traditions that vanished from American life. Number 25, the penny pitch booth. Before arcades and before prize cranes, fairgrounds had penny pitch booths where you tossed real copper pennies onto a field of colored glass plates. Land your penny flat on a plate without it sliding off, and you won that dish. The whole set could cost the fair operator about $4, but families would spend twice that trying to win a single dessert plate. Children lined up with fistfuls of pennies earned from chores, tongues out in concentration, flicking coins with a precision that rivaled any carnival sharpshooter. Mothers collected the plates all week, hoping to complete a matching set for the china cabinet. By the mid-1970s, penny pitch had disappeared from most fairs. The plates became too expensive to source cheaply, and game operators switched to stuffed animal prizes that cost even less, yet looked more impressive. Nobody pitches pennies anymore. The skill, the patience, the clink of copper on glass, all of it gone. Number 24, the Farm Equipment Parade. On opening day, every implement dealer in the county drove their newest tractors and combines down Main Street and straight onto the fairgrounds. John Deere Green International Harvester Red and Alice Chalmers Orange rolled bumper to bumper in a procession that could stretch half a mile. Farmers lined the route, judging horsepower the way their wives judged pie crust. In 1963, a new John Deere Model 4010 cost around $3,000, and seeing one gleaming in the fairground sun was the closest most families got to a showroom. Dealers handed out yardsticks and seed caps to anyone who stopped to listen. Children climbed into cabs and pretended to plow imaginary fields. By the 1980s, consolidation wiped out local dealerships. Corporate agriculture replaced the family implement dealer, and the parade lost its purpose. Number 23, the Greased Pig Contest. Nothing drew a bigger crowd on a Saturday afternoon than watching a dozen children chase a pig slathered in lard across a fenced-off ring of churned-up mud. The pig always won the first 3 rounds. Children dove, slid, and tumbled into each other while the pig squealed between their legs with an intelligence that seemed almost personal. The winner sometimes got to keep the pig, which for a farm family meant free bacon come November. The crowd roared louder for the greased pig than for any grandstand act. Fathers who would never set foot on a carnival ride stood 3 deep at that fence hollering instructions. Animal welfare concerns ended most greased pig contests by the late 1970s. The mud ring got paved over. The laughter faded. An entire generation grew up never knowing the chaos of 40 pounds of angry pork outrunning every kid in the county. Number 22, the Canning Competition Hall, an entire building dedicated to rows and rows of glass jars filled with preserved fruits, vegetables, pickles, jams, and relishes. Farm wives spent months perfecting their entries. Judges examined clarity, color, seal integrity, and headspace with the seriousness of a jeweler grading diamonds. A blue ribbon for bread and butter pickles could make a woman famous in 3 townships. In 1965, nearly every county fair in America devoted a full exhibition hall to home canning. The jars glowed like stained glass windows when the afternoon sun hit them. Strawberry preserves, next to dill pickles, next to pickled watermelon rind. Each jar told a story about someone's garden, someone's summer, someone's grandmother's recipe written in pencil on an index card. When supermarkets made canned goods cheap and uniform, fewer women preserved at home. The exhibition halls shrank to a single table, then a corner, then nothing at all. Number 21st, the square dance platform. A raised wooden platform sat near the center of most fairgrounds, and every evening after the livestock judging wrapped up, a caller climbed the steps with a microphone and a fiddle player. Families gathered around as teenagers paired off, and couples married 40 years swung each other through do-si-dos and promenades. The boards creaked and bounced under the weight of spinning dancers. Dust rose in the lantern light. Children sat on hay bales watching their parents move with a grace that seemed impossible outside this moment. Admission was free. The caller knew every family by name. The whole thing ran on volunteerism and muscle memory. By the 1970s, rock and country concerts replaced the square dance platform. Fairs booked touring acts and charged grandstand admission. The platform got dismantled. The caller retired. And the sound of 100 boots hitting pine boards in unison became a memory that only people over 70 can still hear in their heads. Number 20, the baby contest. Mothers dressed their infants in bonnets and Sunday best and paraded them before a panel of judges who awarded ribbons for healthiest baby, most beautiful baby, and happiest baby. In 1960, baby contest drew more entries than any livestock category at many county fairs. Fathers stood at the back pretending they were not nervous, while grandmothers offered unsolicited grooming advice. The winning baby's photo appeared in the county newspaper, clipped and mailed to every relative within 200 miles. By the 1980s, concerns about objectifying children ended most baby contests. The ritual of presenting your child to the community for collective approval vanished. It was gentler than it sounds. It was a town saying your baby is beautiful and meaning it. Number 19, the harness racing circuit. Before stock car racing and demolition derbies took over the grandstand, harness racing was the main attraction at county fairs across the Northeast and Midwest. Standard-bred horses pulled lightweight sulkies around a half-mile dirt track while the crowd pressed against the rail. Local farmers trained their own horses all winter for Fair Week. A good trotter could win $50 in prize money, enough to cover a family's expenses for the entire fair. The thunder of hooves on packed dirt, the snap of the driver's whip, the announcer calling positions through a crackling public address system. Children sat on their father's shoulders, trying to spot their neighbor's horse. By the 1970s, off-track betting and professional racing pulled the best horses away from county circuits. Insurance premiums for live horse racing tripled. The ovals were converted to demolition derby tracks or paved over for parking. The sulkies gathered dust in barns. Nothing at the modern fair comes close to the sound of a tight finish at the county fair. Number 18, the Sideshow tent. Every traveling carnival that set up on the fairgrounds brought a sideshow tent. The banner line stretched across the front with hand-painted canvases promising the world's tallest man, the sword swallower, the fire eater, and the human pretzel. A barker in a straw hat worked the crowd, his voice cutting through the midway noise like a saw through pine. Admission was a quarter. Inside, performers worked acts passed down through carnival families for generations. The sword swallower trained for years. The fire eater knew chemistry most college students could not match. By the late 1960s, changing attitudes about dignity and disability rights began closing sideshow tents. Television brought spectacle into living rooms for free. The banner painters retired. The barkers lost their stages. Those hand-painted sideshow canvases now sell for thousands at auction, ghosts of a world that existed 50 feet from the cotton candy stand. The county fair in the 1960s was not just entertainment, it was the single most important annual economic event for rural communities. Merchants planned their entire yearly inventory around Fair Week. Hotels filled months in advance. The local diner hired extra staff. A 1964 United States Department of Agriculture study estimated that the average county fair generated economic activity equivalent to 6 weeks of normal commerce compressed into 7 days. Every dollar spent on a corn dog rippled through the entire town. When fairs began shrinking in the 1980s, those small towns felt it immediately. We did not just lose traditions. We lost the economic engine that kept small-town America running for one glorious week every summer. Number 16, tobacco spitting contests. In tobacco-growing regions from Kentucky to the Carolinas, the spitting contest was a point of genuine civic pride. Men lined up behind a chalk line, loaded a wad of chewing tobacco, and launched. Distance was measured with a tape measure. Accuracy contests used a tin bucket at 10 paces. The county champion held his title with the same seriousness as a Golden Gloves boxer. Children practiced with watermelon seeds all summer, hoping to qualify for the junior division. Women judged but rarely competed, standing upwind with folded arms and expressions that said everything. Anti-tobacco campaigns in the 1970s and 1980s made these contests increasingly awkward. Fair boards dropped them quietly, replacing the spitting line with ring toss games. The tin bucket disappeared. The chalk line was swept away. But in certain counties, old-timers still remember the exact distance of their best spit and will tell you about it whether you ask or not. Number 15, the horse pulling contest. Teams of draft horses, Percherons, Belgians, and Clydesdales were hitched to weighted sleds and asked to pull increasingly heavy loads across a measured distance. The horses strained, muscles rippling under gleaming hides, while their handlers shouted encouragement and the crowd held its breath. A winning team might pull over 10,000 pounds. Farmers spent months conditioning their horses, feeding them special grain rations, and walking them daily. These were not show animals, they were working partners. As tractors replaced horses on farms, fewer families kept draft teams. The horse pull dwindled at fair after fair. Some state fairs still hold them, but the county-level contests where your neighbor's team competed against the farm down the road have largely disappeared. Number 14, the greased pole climb. A telephone pole stripped of bark and coated in axle grease stood in the center of the fairground with a $10 bill nailed to the top. Anyone could try. Teenagers went first, scrambling up 3 feet before sliding back down, covered in black grease, grinning and cursing in equal measure. Farm boys with strong hands and no quit in them sometimes made it halfway, before gravity and petroleum jelly conspired against them. The crowd offered advice that was never useful. Fathers crossed their arms and claimed they could have done it in their day. Occasionally, someone actually reached the top, snatching that bill while the crowd erupted. $10 in 1962 was real money, enough to ride every ride and eat everything the Midway had to offer. Liability insurance killed the greased pole by the mid-1970s. A boy in Ohio broke his collarbone. A teenager in Indiana needed stitches. The poles came down and never went back up. But everyone who tried still remembers the smell of axle grease and the feeling of sliding backward with the whole town watching. Number 13, the Seed Art Exhibition. Farm families glued thousands of individual seeds, corn, wheat, millet, sunflower, flax, and a dozen others onto boards to create intricate pictures. Landscapes, portraits, American flags, and scenes of rural life, all made from the same seeds that grew in the fields surrounding the fairground. A single piece might take 300 hours to complete. The artists selected seeds by color and size, the way a painter mixes pigment. County fairs across the grain belt had dedicated exhibition space for these works. Children pressed their noses against the glass cases, trying to identify which seed was which. Fewer farm families meant fewer artists who understood seed varieties by sight and touch. By the 1990s, seed art had retreated to a handful of state fairs. The county-level exhibitions vanished almost entirely, and with them went a folk art form as American as the land it celebrated. Number 12, the Community Barbecue Pit. Before food vendors arrived in corporate trucks with franchise logos, the county fair barbecue was cooked by volunteers in a pit dug right on the fairgrounds. Local men arrived before dawn to start the coals. Whole hogs or sides of beef slow roasted over hickory and oak for 12 hours. The smoke rose above the fairground like a signal fire. By noon, the smell reached every corner of town. A plate cost 50 cents and came with coleslaw, beans, and 2 slices of white bread. The men who cooked knew each other's families, attended each other's churches, and argued about rub recipes with a passion that bordered on religious conviction. The barbecue was not a concession, it was a civic act. When health regulations tightened in the 1970s, open pit cooking on public grounds became a bureaucratic nightmare. Corporate food vendors moved in with their deep fryers and their insurance certificates. The pit was filled in. The smoke stopped rising. Fair food became something you bought from a stranger instead of something your neighbor made for you. Number 11, the Fair Queen Pageant. Every county fair crowned a fair queen, usually a local girl between 16 and 20 who competed in evening gown, talent, and interview categories before a panel of community judges. The winner rode in a convertible during the opening parade, waving with a tiara and a sash, while the high school band played behind her. In 1965, being named Fair Queen was one of the highest honors a young woman could receive in a rural county. It went on college applications. Her photograph hung in the exhibition hall for a full year. Fathers in the audience clapped so hard their palms turned red. By the 1990s, beauty pageants fell out of favor. Fair boards renamed the competition or eliminated it entirely. The convertible stopped rolling. The tiara went into a box. But women who wore that crown in 1963 still keep the sash in their closet, and will show it to you if you ask. Second pattern break. Here is what changed everything. In 1966, the National Safety Council began publishing guidelines for traveling carnivals and amusement operations. Before that, rides were assembled by crews who had been building them for decades, tightening bolts by feel and testing gravity with instinct. A Ferris wheel operator in 1962 might have learned his trade from his father, who learned it from his father. The rides creaked and swayed, but serious accidents were remarkably rare because those operators knew their machines the way a farmer knew his tractor. When standardized regulations arrived, they brought insurance premiums that small independent operators could not afford. The family-run Carnival companies folded one by one, replaced by large corporations that trucked identical rides to identical fairs across the country. The Midway lost its personality. Every fair started to look the same. We got safer rides, and we lost the men who built them with their hands. Number 9. The Handshake livestock auction. Before computerized bidding, livestock sales at the county fair happened face-to-face. The auctioneer stood on a hay bale, and farmers bid with nods, finger raises, and hat tips so subtle that outsiders could not follow the action. A man's word was his contract. A handshake sealed every deal. In 1962, a prize 4-H steer might fetch $200, bid up by local businessmen who wanted their name in the paper for supporting the youth. The buyer and the child who raised the animal shook hands in front of the whole community. That handshake taught a 12-year-old more about commerce, trust, and accountability than any textbook ever could. Corporate buyers and online bidding platforms changed everything. The auctioneer still chants, but the buyers sit in offices 100 miles away. The handshake became a wire transfer. The lesson became a transaction. Number 8. The Taffy pull demonstration. Candy makers set up in the exhibition hall and pulled saltwater taffy by hand in front of a live audience. 2 workers stretched a hot mass of sugar between hooks mounted on a wooden frame, folding and pulling until the candy turned glossy and pale. The whole process took 15 minutes and drew crowds 3 deep. Children watched, hypnotized, as the candy stretched impossibly thin without breaking. Free samples went to anyone who waited. A quarter-pound bag cost 15 cents. Machine-made candy replaced handmade taffy by the 1970s. The demonstration booths packed up because pulling taffy required skilled workers who were becoming impossible to find. The stretch and fold of hot sugar, the rhythm of 2 people working in perfect sync, the warm vanilla smell that hung in the exhibition hall, all were replaced by a plastic bag with a barcode. Number 7. The Quilting Bee demonstration. Women from the local quilting circle set up a full-size quilting frame in the exhibition hall and stitched in public for the entire week of the fair. Visitors could watch the needle pass through layers of fabric and batting. Each stitch, placed with precision, earned over decades of practice. The quilters talked as they worked, and the conversation was half the attraction. They knew who had married whom, which farm had been sold, and whose son had come home from the service. In 1963, a handmade quilt entered in competition might win a $5 prize, but the real reward was the blue ribbon displayed in the parlor. Quilting bees disappeared from fairgrounds as the women who practiced them aged and younger generations did not replace them. The frames were folded and stored. The needles went quiet. Today, quilts are judged at fairs, but the communal act of making one in public, of stitching and storytelling together, has vanished from the fairground entirely. Number 6. The Cakewalk. A circle of numbered squares was taped or painted on the ground, and participants walked around it while music played. When the music stopped, a number was drawn, and whoever stood on that number won a homemade cake. Entry cost a nickel. The cakes were donated by women in the community, and the best bakers were known by name. Landing on Mrs. Henderson's German chocolate cake was the jackpot. Landing on the store-bought angel food was the consolation prize nobody wanted, but everybody clapped for. The Cakewalk raised money for the church, the volunteer fire department, or the 4-H club. It was democratic, cheap, and brought together children and grandparents in the same circle. Liability concerns about homemade food donations and the rise of professional fundraising ended most cakewalks by the 1990s. The numbered squares were painted over. The music stopped for good. An entire generation never learned the specific heartbreak of being one square away from a 3-layer coconut cake. Number 5. The tractor pull with farm tractors. Before purpose-built pulling machines with aircraft engines dominated the sport, the county fair tractor pull featured the same machines that plowed fields all week. Farmers drove their own John Deeres, Fords, and Farmalls onto the track, hitched to a weighted sled, and pulled until the wheels spun or the engine stalled. The crowd knew every tractor by sight and every farmer by name. When old Mr. Kessler's 1948 Farmall H outpulled a newer model, the grandstand went wild. Children sat on the rail fence memorizing horsepower numbers like baseball statistics. Today's tractor pulls are dominated by modified machines that no working farmer could afford. The farmer on his own tractor, pulling with the same engine that harvested his corn, that was the contest that mattered. That was the pull the crowd understood in their bones. Number 4. The 4-H cooking demonstration stage. Teenage girls, and sometimes boys, stood on a small stage in the exhibition hall and demonstrated a recipe from start to finish in front of judges and a live audience. They narrated every step, explained their ingredient choices, and answered questions while keeping composure in front of a crowd. In 1964, a winning demonstration could earn a scholarship to the State University's home economics program. The stakes were real. Mothers sat in the audience mouthing the recipe steps, along with their daughters, hands clasped, white-knuckled in their laps. When home economics programs were cut from schools in the 1980s and the 1990s, the pipeline of young demonstrators dried up. The stage went dark. The scholarship money was redirected, and one of the most effective youth development programs in rural America disappeared without anyone passing a law or making a speech about it. Third pattern, break. The disappearance of these traditions was not accidental. Insurance companies drove half of them underground. Between 1965 and 1985, liability premiums for county fairs increased by over 400% in some states. Every greased pole, every pig chase, every open pit barbecue was a lawsuit waiting to happen in the eyes of an underwriter 1,000 miles from the fairground. Fair boards that had operated on handshakes suddenly needed attorneys and incident reports. The traditions that survived were the ones that could be insured. The ones that disappeared were the ones that could not. We did not choose to abandon them. We were priced out of them. Number 2, the nighttime livestock barn. After the judging was done and the ribbons were hung, the livestock barns transformed into something magical after dark. Farm families slept alongside their animals on cots and sleeping bags spread across hay bales. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting shadows across the stalls. Children from neighboring farms stayed up whispering and trading stories, while prize heifers chewed their cud 3 feet away. The smell of hay, manure, and canvas mixed into something that anyone who experienced it can recall instantly. Fathers checked water buckets one last time. Mothers tucked blankets around children who were too excited to sleep. The barn at night was the closest thing rural America had to summer camp. Modern fairs discourage overnight stays. Security concerns and sanitation rules ended the tradition. The barns close at 10 now. The cots are gone. The lanterns are gone. The whispered conversations between children who saw each other only once a year at fair time, those are gone too. And finally, number 1, the community supper on the final night. On the last evening of Fair Week, before the Carnival crews began tearing down the rides, the entire community gathered under a canvas tent for a potluck supper that marked the end of the season. Every family brought a dish, long folding tables stretched end to end, covered in checkered cloths and loaded with casseroles, fried chicken, potato salad, biscuits, pies, and cakes. The minister or the county judge said grace. Then 500 people ate together. Children ran between tables, stealing rolls from each other's plates. Farmers who had competed all week sat side by side and complimented each other's livestock with the generosity that comes when the ribbons have already been handed out. The supper was free. The only cost was bringing something to share. It was democracy at its most literal, everyone feeding everyone. Health regulations, liability insurance, and the sheer logistics of feeding hundreds without a commercial kitchen ended the community supper at most fairs by the late 1970s. The tent was folded for the last time. The tables were returned. The tradition of an entire county sitting down to eat together, neighbors and strangers and rivals breaking bread on the same night, ended so quietly that most people did not realize it was gone until they tried to remember the last time it happened. These 25 traditions were not just entertainment. They were the rituals that held rural communities together for 1 week every year. What replaced them are spectacles you watch, not experiences you join. The county fair still exists, and the corn dogs still taste the same. But the version your grandparents knew, the one where every family had a role and every tradition had a purpose, closed its gates decades ago. If you remember any of these, tell me which one in the comments. And if your grandmother still has a blue ribbon or a Fair Queen sash in the back of a closet, ask her about it this week. Those stories are disappearing faster than the traditions themselves.